I am Ron, 34 years old, and I always believed family meant unconditional love. Growing up as the responsible one while my brother Jake basked in favoritism taught me patience. But nothing prepared me for my wedding rehearsal, when Jake pushed me down a marble staircase. Blood streamed from my head as I looked up to see my mother laughing, saying I deserved it, while my father dismissed it as just stairs and told me to stop making drama. I smiled through the pain. They had no idea what I would do next. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, drop a comment below letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button as we dive into a story about family, betrayal, and finding your voice. My story begins in suburban Chicago, where I grew up with my younger brother Jake, who is now 31. From early childhood, the pattern was clear. Our parents, Margaret and Richard, created a household with two sets of rules. Jake was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was held to impossible standards. The inequity started small. When I was 10, I accidentally knocked over a crystal vase while vacuuming, a chore Jake never had to do. I spent 2 weeks grounded and had to use my birthday money to replace it. 3 months later, Jake deliberately threw a baseball through our living room window during an argument with a friend. My parents called it boys being boys and paid for the repairs without a single consequence for Jake. This pattern continued and intensified throughout our childhood. On my 16th birthday, I received a used bike and was told I should appreciate the gift because money doesn't grow on trees. 6 months later, Jake got a brand new car for his 16th birthday. When I questioned this disparity, my mother said, "Your brother needs more support and encouragement than you do, Ron. You should be mature enough to understand that by now." High school graduation should have been my moment. I was valedictorian, had secured a partial scholarship to Northwestern, and worked 2 part-time jobs to save for tuition. The small celebration my parents reluctantly agreed to host was ruined when Jake, angry that attention wasn't on him, accidentally spilled punch on my graduation gown just before pictures. When I expressed frustration, my father pulled me aside and said, "Why do you always have to make everything so dramatic? It's just a gown. You're ruining the day for everyone." College was a financial struggle. I worked 30 hours weekly while maintaining a 3.9 gigapascals in architecture. Meanwhile, Jake bounced between 3 colleges in 4 years, barely passing classes, with our parents covering his full tuition, apartment, and spending money. When he finally graduated with a mediocre GPA, my parents threw him an extravagant party that cost more than my entire first-year tuition. I wasn't even asked to help plan it. Through those years, I internalized a dangerous belief that my worth was tied to achievement and that love had to be earned through perfection. It wasn't until I met Meredith during my final year of graduate school that someone finally saw through the facade I had built. Meredith, with her background in psychology and her warm, direct nature, recognized the signs of my family dynamic immediately. After meeting my family at a holiday dinner, where my mother criticized my career choice while praising Jake's job at our uncle's company, Meredith gently suggested I might benefit from therapy. "What you're describing isn't normal, Ron," she said as we drove home that night. "Parents aren't supposed to have favorites. The way they dismiss your feelings while catering to Jake's every whim isn't healthy." Initially, I defended my family. "They're just old-fashioned. Jake was always more sensitive, needed more support." Meredith took my hand. "That's what they trained you to believe, but I've watched you dim your light around them, and it breaks my heart." 6 months into our relationship, I began therapy with Dr. Liam Richards. Those weekly sessions became the foundation for rebuilding my sense of self-worth. Dr. Richards helped me recognize the patterns of emotional neglect and the subtle ways I'd been trained to put Jake's needs before my own. "Your achievements weren't celebrated because they challenged the family narrative," Dr. Richards explained. "In their story, Jake is the special one who needs protection and praise, while you're the self-sufficient one who doesn't need acknowledgement. Neither perspective is accurate or fair." As my career as an architect flourished, the contrast between my professional life and family dynamics became even more pronounced. Colleagues respected my input, clients praised my designs, and Meredith supported my growth unconditionally. Yet family gatherings remained exercises in invisibility, with conversations centered around Jake's latest endeavors, while my projects were given cursory acknowledgement, if mentioned at all. When I proposed to Meredith after 3 years together, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter. She had shown me what genuine love looked like: supportive, reciprocal, and free from constant comparison. During our engagement dinner at a lakeside restaurant, Meredith suggested we consider a small wedding with just close friends. "We could avoid the family drama," she said tentatively. "Your parents might make the day more stressful than it needs to be." I understood her concerns but wasn't ready to give up on the possibility of a normal family relationship. "This might be a chance for things to change," I explained. "A wedding brings families together. Maybe seeing us commit to each other will help them understand how serious and stable our relationship is." Meredith wasn't convinced but supported my decision. "I just want you to be prepared for the possibility that they might bring their usual dynamic to our wedding planning. Promise me you'll set boundaries if needed?" I promised, not realizing how prophetic her concerns would prove to be, or how dramatically things would unravel at our wedding rehearsal. Looking back, I should have listened more carefully to the woman who had become my rock and my voice of reason. But some lessons can only be learned through painful experience. The day I proposed to Meredith remains one of my happiest memories. I had arranged a private dinner at the Chicago Botanical Garden, where we had our first date. When I knelt beside the koi pond and asked her to build a life with me, her joyful tears and immediate yes filled me with hope for our future. That hope extended to my family relationships. Despite years of therapy helping me recognize the dysfunction, part of me still believed that my wedding might be the event that finally changed the dynamic. Perhaps seeing me take this important life step would help my parents recognize me as an equal adult, worthy of the same respect they showed Jake. The cracks in this optimistic vision appeared almost immediately. When we announced our engagement at a family dinner, my mother's first response wasn't congratulations, but concern about timing. "Are you sure you're ready for this commitment? You've always been so focused on your career," she said, glancing at my father for support. Then, turning to Jake, she added, "What do you think of your brother getting married before you?" Jake, then dating his girlfriend Amber for just 6 months, laughed. "Better him than me. I've still got wild oats to sow." My parents chuckled appreciatively, while Meredith squeezed my hand under the table. When actual wedding planning began, the tensions escalated. Meredith and I had saved carefully and could afford a beautiful ceremony at a historic mansion in Lake Forest without financial help. We made this clear to both sets of parents, but my mother immediately positioned herself as an essential consultant. "You can't possibly know how to plan a proper wedding," she told Meredith during our first planning lunch. "Fortunately, Amber has excellent taste and has helped plan several society events. I've asked her to be available for consultation." Meredith, always gracious, thanked her, but explained that we had already hired a professional wedding planner named Kelly. My mother's lips thinned in disapproval. "Well, I suppose if you're determined to do things your own way, we'll just have to work around it. Though I can't imagine why you'd waste money on a planner when Amber has offered her services for free." Every decision became a battlefield. When Meredith selected a sophisticated slate blue and silver color scheme, my mother complained that it was too cold and suggested pink and gold, like Amber used for the charity gala she organized. When we chose a menu featuring locally sourced ingredients, my father called it pretentious food nobody will eat and suggested we serve steak, Jake's favorite meal. Jake's participation created additional strain. Traditional etiquette suggested he should be my best man, but our relationship had deteriorated further in recent years. His drinking had increased, and his comments had become more cutting. At a family birthday celebration just months before the wedding, he had loudly asked when Meredith was going to come to her senses and find someone more fun. I had confronted him privately afterward, only to have him dismiss it as just a joke while my parents accused me of being too sensitive. Despite these concerns, I felt trapped by family expectation and reluctantly asked Jake to be my best man. Meredith supported my decision but suggested we give him limited responsibilities. "I'm worried he'll make the day about himself," she admitted, "or that he'll say something hurtful during the toast." Her concerns proved prophetic during the rehearsal dinner 2 weeks before the wedding. Jake arrived visibly intoxicated, though my parents insisted he was just nervous about his speech. When he stood to give his toast, what followed wasn't brotherly ribbing but a 5-minute monologue about my perceived flaws and how Meredith was settling for the boring brother. "To Ron," he concluded, raising his 4th glass of whiskey, "who always did everything right, except develop a personality." My parents laughed appreciatively, while our other guests sat in uncomfortable silence. Meredith's parents, David and Susan, had observed the family dynamic with increasing concern. After the rehearsal dinner, David pulled me aside. "Son, I don't mean to overstep," he said quietly, "but the way your brother speaks to you isn't right, and your parents seem to encourage it." "It's complicated," I replied. "The standard defense I'd used for years. Jake has always been the family jokester. He doesn't mean anything by it. David placed a hand on my shoulder. There's a difference between jokes and cruelty, Ron. You deserve better, especially on your wedding day. That conversation stayed with me, planting seeds of courage that would later bloom in unexpected ways. But at the time, I was still caught in the familiar pattern of making excuses for my family's behavior while downplaying my own hurt. Meanwhile, Meredith was struggling to maintain her composure around my family. After watching my mother criticize everything from her dress choice to her hairstyle, she confessed her growing anxiety. "I want our wedding to be beautiful," she said one night as we sat on our apartment balcony. "But sometimes I think your mother will find fault, no matter what we do, and Jake seems determined to make things difficult. I'm worried about how they'll behave during the actual wedding." I pulled her close, promising that everything would be fine, that family tensions always ran high before weddings. "Once the day arrives, everyone will be on their best behavior," I assured her. It was a promise I had no power to keep, though I didn't know it then. As our wedding day approached, the undercurrents of family dysfunction that had shaped my childhood were gathering strength, preparing to crash over the most important day of our lives in ways I couldn't have imagined. The morning of our wedding rehearsal dawned clear and perfect. I remember standing on our apartment balcony, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint Chicago's skyline in golden hues. Despite the tensions of previous months, optimism swelled within me. Today would be different, I told myself. The beauty of the venue, the significance of the occasion would surely bring out the best in everyone, even Jake and my parents. "Today feels special," I told Meredith as she joined me, wrapping a robe around her shoulders. "I think everything's going to come together perfectly." She smiled, kissing my cheek. "I hope so. The mansion looks incredible with all the decorations in place." We had chosen the Lakewood Historic Mansion for both its architectural beauty and its significance to Meredith. Her grandparents had celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary there, and the venue's grand staircase, a sweeping marble structure that descended gracefully into the main reception area, had featured prominently in her favorite childhood photos of that event. "I keep picturing us on those stairs," she had said, when we first toured the venue, making our entrance together, surrounded by everyone we love. The image had sealed our decision, and now, after months of planning, the rehearsal day had finally arrived. We arrived at the mansion by early afternoon. Our wedding planner, Kelly, was already directing the setup, her clipboard in hand as she instructed staff on flower arrangements and lighting. Meredith's parents arrived shortly after, bringing homemade cookies for everyone involved in the rehearsal. "The place looks magical," Susan said, hugging us both. "Those blue uplights on the staircase are perfect." Kelly had scheduled the actual rehearsal for 4 o'clock, leaving time for everyone to arrive and get comfortable with the space. By 3:30, most of the wedding party had arrived. Meredith's sister Amanda as maid of honor, our close friends serving as bridesmaids and groomsmen, even Meredith's elderly grandmother who would do a special reading during the ceremony. By 3:45, my parents had arrived, my mother immediately finding fault with the chair arrangements and my father complaining about the parking situation. But Jake was nowhere to be seen, despite his critical role as best man. "He's probably just stuck in traffic," my mother said dismissively when Kelly inquired about his whereabouts. "You know how the expressway gets." 4 o'clock came and went. Kelly, ever the professional, suggested we begin without Jake and walk him through his role when he arrived. We had just lined up for the processional practice when the mansion's grand doors swung open with unnecessary force, and Jake stumbled in, sunglasses on despite being indoors, tie askew. Even from across the room, I could smell the alcohol. Jake wasn't just late, he was visibly intoxicated at 4 in the afternoon for a rehearsal that had been on the calendar for months. Kelly approached him with a tight smile. "You must be Jake. We're just getting started with the processional. If you could take your place next to Ron, we can continue." Jake slapped my back with unnecessary force as he took his position. "Sorry I'm late, bro. Had to get a little liquid courage before all this fancy stuff." My mother hurried over, straightening his tie. "Jake was just nervous about doing everything right," she explained to Kelly. "He wants the day to be perfect for his brother." The rehearsal proceeded with constant interruptions. Jake missed his cues, made jokes during serious moments, and at one point loudly asked if we could speed this up because he was dying for a real drink. Kelly maintained her composure, but I could see Meredith's bridesmaids exchanging concerned glances. During the ring exchange practice, Jake patted his pockets dramatically before announcing, "Oops, forgot the fake rings. Guess this means Ron isn't really getting married tomorrow." He laughed at his own joke while my parents smiled indulgently. "It's just a rehearsal," my father said when Kelly explained the importance of practicing with the ring pillow. "No need to be so uptight about every little detail." While Kelly was reviewing the ceremony outline with the officiant, I overheard Jake talking to two of my college friends who were serving as groomsmen. "Can't believe Ron's actually going through with this," he said, voice carrying more than he probably intended. "Meredith's hot, but man, marriage is a prison sentence. Plus, you know Ron, always so serious about everything. She's gonna get bored real quick." Something in me snapped. After months of enduring his jabs, watching him undermine our relationship and our wedding plans, this felt like the final straw. I approached the group, asked my friends if I could speak to Jake privately, and led him to a small side room off the main hall. "What's your problem?" I asked directly, closing the door behind us. "This is important to me and Meredith. Why can't you just be supportive for one day?" Jake rolled his eyes. "Lighten up, bro. I'm just keeping things fun. This whole production is so, everything perfect, everything controlled. It's not about perfect, it's about respect. You showed up drunk to the rehearsal. You're embarrassing yourself and making this harder for everyone, especially Meredith." His face darkened. "Oh, of course. Heaven forbid anyone upset precious Meredith. You know, you've changed since meeting her. You used to be able to take a joke. This isn't about jokes. This is about you consistently trying to undermine my relationship and my wedding. If you can't be supportive, maybe you shouldn't be my best man." That hit a nerve. Jake's voice rose. "Are you serious? You'd kick your own brother out of your wedding party? Mom and Dad would never forgive you. This isn't about them. It's about what kind of energy we want surrounding us on our wedding day." Jake stormed out, slamming the door behind him. When I returned to the main hall, my parents immediately cornered me. "What did you say to upset your brother?" my mother demanded. "He looks furious." I asked him to take the rehearsal seriously and respect Meredith. My father shook his head. "You know how Jake is. He's just nervous and showing it in his own way. You've always been too hard on him." The familiar script played out exactly as it had throughout our childhood. Jake behaved inappropriately. I established a boundary, and somehow I became the villain of the story. Despite being 34 years old, engaged to be married, I felt like I was 10 again, being told to accommodate Jake's feelings at the expense of my own. The rehearsal continued with Jake, sulking dramatically, making a show of his compliance by exaggerating every movement and speaking his responses in a monotone voice. My parents watched with matching expressions of disapproval, directed at me, not at the grown man acting like a petulant child. Meredith noticed the tension and squeezed my hand supportively during a break. "Everything okay?" she whispered. I nodded, not wanting to worry her with the details. "Just the usual family stuff. It'll be fine." I had no idea how wrong I was, or how the evening would escalate from uncomfortable tension to a moment that would permanently alter my relationship with my family. The formal rehearsal concluded around 6 o'clock. Kelly had efficiently guided us through each element of the ceremony despite Jake's disruptive behavior. The plan was to take some informal photos on the mansion's grand staircase before heading to a nearby restaurant for the rehearsal dinner. The staircase truly was the architectural jewel of the venue, 20 marble steps descending in a graceful curve from the upper landing to the main floor, with an ornate wooden banister and wrought iron rails. With the blue uplighting we had selected, it looked magical as the evening sun filtered through stained glass windows. "Let's get the full wedding party on the stairs," our photographer Alicia suggested. The couple at the top of the stairs, then the wedding party arranged down the steps. While everyone took their places, I noticed Jake at the bar, downing what appeared to be his third or fourth whiskey since arriving. Our mother stood beside him, her hand on his back, apparently consoling him after our confrontation. My father joined them, shaking his head as Jake gestured dramatically in my direction. "Ron and Meredith, if you could stand at the very top," Alicia directed. "Maid of honor and best man on the step just below you." Meredith's sister Amanda took her place, but Jake was still at the bar. Kelly went to retrieve him, returning with a visibly reluctant Jake, who climbed the stairs slowly, deliberately bumping shoulders with me as he took his position. "Try to smile, everyone," Alicia called out. "This is a happy occasion." The tension was palpable as we arranged ourselves on the staircase. Meredith and I stood at the top landing, with Jake and Amanda just below us. The bridesmaids and groomsmen were positioned down the steps, with our parents and Meredith's parents at the bottom. As Alicia adjusted her camera settings, I felt Jake shift beside me, moving closer than necessary. The smell of whiskey was overwhelming. "You think you're so much better than everyone," he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. "Perfect Ron with his perfect fiancée and his perfect life. You've always thought you were better than me." "This isn't the time, Jake," I whispered back, maintaining my smile for the camera. "We can talk later if you want." "Oh, now you want to talk? After embarrassing me in front of everyone?" His voice was rising slightly, drawing glances from Amanda and the groomsmen nearest us. "Please, Jake. Not here, not now." I was acutely aware of Meredith beside me, of her parents watching from below, of all our friends who had gathered to celebrate with us. "You know what your problem is?" Jake continued, ignoring my request. "You've spent your whole life being jealous of me. Jealous that Mom and Dad love me more. Jealous that I actually know how to have fun while you're always so uptight." I took a deep breath, determined not to engage. "We're about to take photos. Can we please just get through this?" "Everyone ready?" Alicia called out. On the count of 3, big smiles. "Jake wasn't finished. You've always resented me. Even when we were kids, you couldn't stand that I got attention. And now you're trying to exclude me from your wedding because your stuck-up fiancé doesn't like me." That crossed a line. "Leave Meredith out of this," I said firmly, keeping my voice low but direct. "This is between you and me." "Oh, defending her honor?" Jake sneered. "She's got you completely whipped. Does she know you're only marrying her because you're desperate to start your own family since ours was such a disappointment to you?" Meredith tensed beside me, having overheard this last comment. I placed a reassuring hand on her back. "That's enough, Jake," I said, no longer whispering. "You're drunk and saying things you don't mean. Step back and cool off. Don't tell me what to do in front of everyone," Jake hissed, his face flushing with anger or alcohol or both. "You don't control me just because you think you're so perfect." 1, 2. Alicia was counting down for the photo. What happened next occurred so quickly that many guests saw only the aftermath. Jake, his expression contorted with a rage that seemed disproportionate to our exchange, suddenly placed both hands on my chest and shoved with all his strength. The force caught me completely off guard. There was a moment of suspended disbelief as I lost my balance at the top of the marble staircase. Meredith gasped and reached for me, but it was too late. I felt myself falling backward, a sickening moment of weightlessness before the first impact. My body tumbled down the hard marble steps, each one delivering a painful blow. I was vaguely aware of screams and shouts as I rolled, unable to catch myself. The world spun in a blur of ceiling, faces, and the ornate chandelier that hung above the staircase. After what seemed like an eternity but was probably only seconds, I landed at the bottom of the stairs in a crumpled heap. The shock gave way to immediate pain. My head had struck one of the bottom steps, and I could feel warm blood trickling down my temple. My left wrist throbbed where I had instinctively tried to break my fall. The room erupted in chaos. Meredith rushed down the stairs, her face pale with fear. "Ron. Oh my God, Ron." She knelt beside me, her hands hovering uncertainty over my injured form. Kelly was immediately on her phone, calling for first aid. Alicia had abandoned her camera and was helping Meredith assess my injuries. Meredith's father, David, pushed through the crowd forming around me. "Give him space," he commanded. "Someone get a clean cloth for his head." Through the confusion and pain, I became aware of 3 reactions that would forever alter my perception of my family. At the top of the stairs, Jake stood with a strange mixture of shock and satisfaction on his face, making no move to come down or check on me. He didn't look remorseful, just surprised at his own actions. My father remained at the bottom of the stairs, shaking his head with an expression of annoyance rather than concern. "It's just stairs," he said loudly. "Stop making such drama out of everything." But it was my mother's reaction that cut deepest. She was laughing, actually laughing, as she climbed a few steps to join Jake. "Well, you always did know how to provoke your brother," she said to him, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ron, honestly, you deserve that for how you've been treating Jake today." The room fell silent at her words. Meredith's mother, Susan, gasped audibly. David, still kneeling beside me, looked up at my mother with undisguised shock. "Are you serious right now?" he demanded. "Your son was just pushed down a flight of stairs and is bleeding, and that's your response?" My mother's smile faded slightly at being challenged. "You don't understand their relationship. They've always been like this, rough housing, and then Ron exaggerates for attention." "This isn't rough housing," Meredith said, her voice shaking as she pressed a cloth to my bleeding head. "This is assault. Jake could have killed him falling down these marble stairs." My father stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the situation escalating beyond the family's usual pattern of minimizing and dismissing. Let's not be dramatic. Boys will be boys, and Ron's always been sensitive. He's fine, just a little bump. As they spoke about me as if I wasn't there, bleeding on the floor of what should have been my wedding venue, something crystallized within me. A profound clarity cut through the physical pain and confusion. This moment, this stark, undeniable example of my family's dysfunction, was somehow liberating in its transparency. I sat up slowly, assisted by David and one of my groomsmen. Blood had soaked the cloth pressed to my temple, and my wrist was already swelling. But despite these injuries, I felt strangely calm. "Meredith," I said quietly, "I think we should go to the emergency room to get my head checked." She nodded, relief evident in her face at my coherent response. "The rehearsal dinner," my mother protested. "Everyone's expecting us at the restaurant in 30 minutes. I looked directly at her, perhaps truly seeing her for the first time. "I've just been pushed down a flight of stairs and need medical attention. The dinner will have to wait." The simplicity of this statement, delivered without anger or accusation, seemed to momentarily disarm her. She looked to my father for support, but he was already backing toward the door, clearly eager to escape the situation that had spiraled beyond the family's ability to normalize it. As David and my friend Michael helped me to my feet, I caught Jake's eye at the top of the stairs. For a brief moment, something like uncertainty crossed his face, perhaps the first recognition that his actions had consequences beyond our family's closed system. I didn't say anything to him. I didn't need to. As Meredith and her parents helped me toward the exit, I realized I had all the information I needed to make decisions that had been a long time coming. The emergency room at Lake Forest Hospital was predictably busy for a Friday night. Meredith sat beside me in the waiting area, holding my uninjured hand while I pressed an ice pack to my swollen wrist. The cut on my temple had been examined by the triage nurse, who determined it would need a few stitches but wasn't serious enough to warrant immediate attention. The doctor said head wounds always bleed dramatically, Meredith reassured me, but they want to do a concussion check to be safe. I nodded, wincing as the movement sent a sharp pain through my temple. I'm more worried about tomorrow than about my injuries. My phone had been buzzing consistently for the past hour. Text messages from wedding guests, concerned calls from friends who had witnessed the incident, and multiple missed calls from my mother. I had silenced it after reading her first text. "We're all at the restaurant waiting. Are you coming, or should we just start without you? Jake feels terrible, but accidents happen." Accidents. The word echoed in my mind, a perfect encapsulation of how my family rewrote reality to protect Jake and invalidate my experiences. David and Susan had driven us to the hospital and now sat across from us in the waiting room. They had canceled the rehearsal dinner with a brief, factual explanation to the guests. Now they watched me with concerned expressions, clearly unsure what to say. Finally, David cleared his throat. "Ron, I don't mean to overstep, but after what we witnessed tonight, Susan and I have concerns about tomorrow's wedding." Susan nodded in agreement. "Not about you and Meredith," she clarified quickly. "You two are perfect together, but your brother's behavior was dangerous, and your parents' response was—" She trailed off, seemingly unable to find an appropriately diplomatic word. "Inexcusable," David finished for her. "I've never seen parents laugh when their child is injured. If you want to reconsider who should be present tomorrow, we would completely understand and support whatever decision you make." Their words hung in the air between us. The suggestion that had seemed unthinkable just hours ago, excluding my own family from my wedding, now felt like a real possibility. "I need to think," I said finally. "This isn't a decision to make when I'm still bleeding and in shock." A nurse called my name then, and Meredith accompanied me to an examination room where a doctor confirmed I had a mild concussion and applied 5 stitches to my temple. My wrist wasn't broken, just badly sprained. I was discharged with pain medication, wound care instructions, and advice to rest. By the time we returned to our apartment, it was nearly midnight. The rehearsal dinner would have ended hours ago. My phone showed 15 missed calls and 32 text messages, but I couldn't bring myself to read them. "You should sleep," Meredith said gently, helping me settle onto our bed. "Tomorrow's decisions can wait until morning." But sleep proved elusive. As I lay in the darkness, the events of the evening replayed in my mind, not just Jake's physical attack, but my parents' reactions, my mother's laughter, my father's dismissal. The years of similar responses to smaller incidents coalesced into a pattern I could no longer ignore or excuse. Around 2 in the morning, I carefully extracted myself from bed, trying not to wake Meredith. In our home office, I called the one person who might help me make sense of this situation. Dr. Richards answered despite the hour. "Ron, is everything all right?" "No," I replied simply. Something happened at the wedding rehearsal. I recounted the evening's events, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of the story. "First, I'm very sorry this happened," Dr. Richards said when I finished. "Are you physically safe now?" "Yes. Mild concussion, stitches, sprained wrist. I'll be okay." "And emotionally? What are you feeling right now?" I considered the question carefully. "Clarity," I finally answered. For the first time, I saw my family dynamics play out in front of witnesses who weren't conditioned to accept it as normal. I saw Meredith's parents' shock, our friends' discomfort. It made me realize how much I've normalized over the years. "That's an important insight," Dr. Richards acknowledged. When dysfunctional patterns are exposed to outside perspective, it often creates a moment of clarity, like you're describing. "The wedding is tomorrow," I continued. "Meredith's parents suggested we might want to reconsider who should be there. I'm torn between the fantasy I've always had about family reconciliation and the reality of who they've shown themselves to be." "What does that reality tell you?" I took a deep breath. "That no achievement of mine will ever be celebrated without being undermined. That Jake's feelings will always matter more than my physical safety. That my parents will never acknowledge the favoritism or their role in enabling Jake's behavior. And knowing that reality, what outcome do you want for your wedding day?" The question hung in the air as I truly considered it for the first time. What did I want, separate from family expectations or social convention? "I want to marry Meredith, surrounded by people who genuinely support us," I said slowly. "People who respect both of us. I don't want to spend my wedding day managing Jake's behavior or my parents' reactions. I don't want Meredith to worry about more incidents." "That sounds like a starting point for your decision," Dr. Richards suggested. "Remember, this isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about creating appropriate boundaries based on demonstrated behavior." After ending the call, I returned to our bedroom to find Meredith awake, sitting up against the headboard. "I heard you on the phone," she said softly. "Are you okay?" I sat beside her, taking her hand. "I think I am, actually. For the first time, I'm seeing my family clearly, without the fog of hope and denial." "And what do you see?" "That they're not going to change, that the patterns are too deeply ingrained, and that I need to stop expecting different results from the same situations." Meredith nodded slowly. "So what does that mean for tomorrow?" "I don't want to cancel our wedding. This day is about us, our commitment, our future. But I think changes need to be made regarding my family's participation." We talked until dawn, weighing options, considering consequences, and ultimately forming a plan that felt both respectful and protective. As the morning light filtered through our blinds, I felt a surprising sense of peace. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be honest, and that alone felt like a gift. By 7 a.m., I had made my decision. I would not allow my family's dysfunction to claim another important moment in my life. Tomorrow would be different, not because they would suddenly change, but because I finally would. Our wedding day dawned bright and clear, the September sky a perfect backdrop for our ceremony at Lakewood Mansion. I stood in front of the mirror in the groom's suite, carefully adjusting my tie with my uninjured hand. The stitches on my temple were visible despite Meredith's makeup artist's best efforts to conceal them, and my sprained wrist was wrapped in a flesh-colored brace. Physical reminders of last night's incident, but I felt strangely unburdened. Michael, my oldest friend who had agreed to step in as best man, watched me with concern. "You seem calm considering everything. Are you sure about this?" I nodded, meeting his eyes in the mirror. More sure than I've ever been about anything except marrying Meredith. The night before, after hours of discussion, Meredith and I had made our decision. We would proceed with the wedding, but with significant changes. Jake would not serve as best man, nor would he stand with the wedding party. My parents would be welcome to attend as guests, but only if they could respect our boundaries. We had communicated these changes via email, rather than phone calls that could devolve into manipulation. So far, there had been no response from my family. "Do you think they'll come?" asked Chris, another groomsman and college roommate who had witnessed years of my family's dynamics. "I honestly don't know," I replied. "But either way, we're getting married today surrounded by people who genuinely support us." Kelly, our wedding planner, knocked on the door. "Everything's on schedule," she reported. "Guests are arriving. Meredith looks stunning. How are you holding up?" I'm good, I assured her. Any sign of my family? Not yet, but there's still time. The ceremony doesn't start for another hour. I checked my phone one last time before placing it in Michael's custody for the duration of the ceremony. Still no response to our email. Part of me felt a pang of sadness, but a larger part felt relief. Perhaps a clean break would be easier than another confrontation. 50 minutes before the ceremony, Kelly returned with an update. Your parents and Jake just arrived. They're asking to see you. I had anticipated this possibility. Please show them to the library. I'll meet them there. The library was a small room off the main hall, private enough for a family conversation but close enough that help was available if needed. I found my parents and Jake waiting when I arrived, their expressions a mixture of indignation and uncertainty. What is this about Jake not being in the wedding? My mother demanded immediately. And some nonsense about us only being allowed to attend as guests? This is ridiculous, Ron. I remained standing near the door, maintaining physical distance. After what happened last night, changes needed to be made. Jake physically assaulted me, and neither of you acknowledged the seriousness of his actions. My father scoffed. It was a little push that got out of hand. Brother's rough house. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. I ended up in the emergency room with a concussion and stitches, I replied calmly. That's not roughhousing. Jake stood slightly behind my parents, uncharacteristically quiet. His eyes were fixed on my injured temple. Well, if you hadn't provoked him, my mother began, but I cut her off. I'm not having this conversation again. I've made my decision. Michael will be my best man today. Jake is welcome to attend the ceremony and reception as a guest, as are both of you, but only if you can respect our boundaries and refrain from causing further disruptions. This is about Meredith, isn't it? My mother accused. She's turning you against your own family. This is about my own self-respect, I corrected her. And yes, partly about protecting Meredith from the patterns I've tolerated for far too long. My father stepped forward, his voice lowering to the tone he had always used to end discussions. Ron, you're making a mistake that will damage this family permanently. Is that really what you want on your wedding day? For the first time, I didn't feel intimidated by this approach. What I want is to marry the woman I love without worrying about being physically attacked or having my feelings dismissed. You have a choice to make right now about whether you can support that. The three of them exchanged glances, a familiar silent communication that had always excluded me. Finally, Jake spoke for the first time. This is bullshit, he said flatly. I'm not going to sit in the audience like some random guest at my own brother's wedding. Then, that's your choice, I replied. But those are the terms. My mother's face hardened. If Jake isn't welcome in the wedding party, then we'll all leave. Is that what you want? To have no family at your wedding? It was the ultimate threat, one that had controlled my behavior for decades, the withdrawal of family connection, unless I complied with their expectations. But today, it held no power. I want you all to be here, but only if you can respect the boundaries I've set. The choice is yours. With that, I left the library and returned to the groom's suite, where my friends waited anxiously. How did it go? Michael asked. About as expected. They're deciding whether to stay on our terms or leave. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of final preparations. Kelly reported that guests were seated, the string quartet was playing, and everything was ready. She didn't mention my family, and I didn't ask. As we lined up for the processional, I glanced into the ceremony space. From my position, I could see the back of the audience, but not the front rows where family would be seated. The middle and back were full, friends and colleagues chatting quietly as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Ready? Kelly asked, clipboard in hand. I nodded, and she signaled the quartet to transition to the processional music. The groomsmen proceeded first, followed by the bridesmaids. Michael gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze before walking down the aisle. I watched him go, then took my position to enter from the side of the altar area as we had practiced. As I stepped into view of the full audience, I finally had a clear view of the front rows. On the bride's side, Meredith's family sat beaming, her elderly grandmother dabbing her eyes already. On what should have been my family's side, the first row sat conspicuously empty. Behind it, uncles, aunts, and cousins shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of some tension but not its nature. In the very back row, partially obscured by a floral arrangement, sat my father alone, no sign of my mother or Jake. A complicated emotion washed over me, part sadness, part relief, part resolution. But before I could process it fully, the music changed, and the doors at the back opened to reveal Meredith on her father's arm. The sight of her in her wedding gown, radiant despite the concern in her eyes as they met mine, centered me immediately. This day was about us, our future, the family we would build together. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. Michael handed over the rings without incident. Meredith's grandmother read a poem about love requiring both tenderness and strength. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves, mine taking on deeper significance after the events of the past 24 hours. I promise to value your feelings as equal to my own, I told Meredith, my voice steady, to build a home where both our voices are heard and respected, to stand beside you as your equal partner, supporting your dreams as fiercely as you've supported mine. As we were pronounced husband and wife, the audience erupted in applause. Meredith squeezed my hand as we turned to face our guests, and I felt a profound sense of having crossed an invisible threshold. Whatever came next, we would face it together, with clear eyes and strong boundaries. At the reception, my father approached awkwardly during the cocktail hour. Your mother and Jake decided to leave, he said, as if this weren't obvious. They feel you've chosen Meredith over your own family. I chose respect over enabling harmful behavior. I corrected him. There's a difference, he sighed, looking suddenly older than his 62 years. I don't understand why everything has to be so dramatic with you. Why couldn't you just let things go for one day? Because some things shouldn't be let go. Because I deserve better than what happened last night, and so does Meredith. He had no response to this, just a sad shake of his head before retreating to a table in the corner where he sat alone for most of the reception before leaving early. Despite this undercurrent of family tension, the reception was joyous. Friends gave heartfelt toasts. Meredith and I shared our first dance to the song that had played when we first met. Her father welcomed me to their family with genuine warmth, promising that I would always have a place where I was valued and respected. As Meredith and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, she pulled me aside for a private moment. Any regrets? She asked softly, searching my face. I thought about the empty seats, about my mother's absence, about the childhood dream of family reconciliation that I was finally allowing to fade. Not one, I replied honestly. Today we started our own family, one built on mutual respect and genuine love. That's worth celebrating, even with empty chairs. She kissed me, careful of my stitches. I'm so proud of you. Setting boundaries isn't easy, especially with family. I had a good teacher, I told her, thinking of how her quiet strength had shown me possibilities I'd never imagined. As we ran through the sparkler tunnel our friends had formed, I felt lighter than I had in years. The path forward wouldn't be simple or painless, but for the first time, it would be honest. And that made all the difference. Our wedding reception continued late into the night, a joyful celebration despite the empty seats at the family table. Friends who had witnessed years of my family's dysfunction expressed quiet support, while those who didn't know the full story simply enjoyed the celebration without asking uncomfortable questions. By the time Meredith and I departed for our honeymoon in Italy, the tension of the previous day had been replaced by excitement for our future. My father had left early, slipping away during the cake cutting. He sent a text later that evening. Your mother is very upset. We'll talk when you return from your trip. I didn't respond. For once, I allowed myself to focus entirely on joy without the undercurrent of family obligation. 2 weeks in the Italian countryside provided perspective that would have been impossible in Chicago. Meredith and I spent hours discussing what healthy boundaries with my family might look like moving forward. No longer was I debating whether the dysfunction existed. Now we were strategizing how to protect ourselves from it, while remaining open to genuine change if it ever occurred. I just want you to be prepared, Meredith cautioned one evening as we sat on our hotel balcony overlooking the Tuscan hills. Your mother especially isn't likely to accept this new dynamic without a fight. She was right. Upon our return to Chicago, my phone contained numerous voicemails and texts, escalating in emotional intensity. My mother vacillated between angry accusations, "You humiliated us in front of everyone," and tearful pleas, "We just want our family back together." Jake had sent a single text, "Way to ruin your own wedding. Hope you're happy with yourself." My father took a different approach, showing up at our apartment unannounced one Saturday morning about a month after the wedding. Meredith was out at a yoga class, and I found myself facing him alone for the first time since the wedding. "Can I come in?" he asked, standing uncomfortably in the hallway. I hesitated, then nodded, leaving the door open as I stepped back into the living room. He followed, looking around at the wedding photos we'd recently hung, his eyes lingering on one of Meredith and me with her parents. "Nice pictures," he said awkwardly. Your mother would like to see them. She's welcome to. She knows where we live. He sighed, sitting on the edge of our sofa. Look, Ron, what happened at the rehearsal was unfortunate. Jake had too much to drink and things got out of hand. But family is family. We need to move past this. It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get, but it still placed no real responsibility on Jake or acknowledgement of the pattern. Just unfortunate circumstances that got out of hand. Moving past it would require acknowledgement of what actually happened, I replied carefully. Jake didn't just have too much to drink. He deliberately pushed me down a flight of stairs, and you and Mom minimized it instead of holding him accountable. My father shifted uncomfortably. That's your version. Jake says he barely touched you, and you overreacted by falling dramatically. The absurdity of this statement might have made me laugh in different circumstances. I ended up in the emergency room with a concussion and stitches. That's not an overreaction. Well, intentions matter. He didn't mean to hurt you that badly. I studied my father's face, seeing for the first time how deeply he believed the narrative that protected Jake at all costs. Intentions don't erase consequences. If I accidentally hit someone with my car, they're still injured regardless of what I intended. He had no response for this, and instead changed tactics. Your mother misses you. She's hurt that you've been ignoring her calls. I'm taking space to figure out what kind of relationship is healthy for me moving forward. I've spent my whole life accommodating Jake's behavior and your and Mom's enabling of it. I'm not doing that anymore. So what, you're just cutting us off? Over one incident? Not one incident. A lifetime of incidents that culminated in something too serious to ignore. I'm not cutting anyone off permanently, but I am requiring change before I re-engage. He left shortly afterward, clearly frustrated by my refusal to simply fall back into old patterns. As I closed the door behind him, I felt a mixture of sadness and resolve. The conversation confirmed what I already knew. Real change would be slow coming, if it came at all. 3 months after the wedding, my mother made her first serious attempt at reconciliation. She suggested meeting with a family therapist, something I had proposed years earlier and been dismissed for. Cautiously optimistic, Meredith and I agreed. The session was revealing in ways my mother hadn't anticipated. When the therapist asked each of us to describe what happened at the wedding rehearsal, the stark differences in our accounts became immediately apparent. Jake was nervous about his best man responsibilities, my mother explained. Ron was being controlling about how everything should go. They had a little scuffle near the stairs, and unfortunately, Ron lost his balance. These things happen between brothers. When I described the same event, including Jake's intoxication, the deliberate push, and my parents' reactions, my mother became visibly agitated. That's not what happened at all, she insisted. You're painting us as monsters. We've always supported you. We paid for your braces, sent you to summer camp, came to your high school graduation. The therapist gently pointed out that meeting basic parental obligations wasn't the same as emotional support. My mother left the session early, declaring it a waste of time since everyone was ganging up on her. We tried 2 more sessions with similar results. The therapist finally suggested that I might need to accept that my parents weren't currently capable of the self-reflection necessary for meaningful change. 6 months after our wedding, Meredith and I discovered we were expecting our first child. The news brought both joy and complicated emotions about family relationships. After much discussion, we decided to share the news with my parents, but with clear boundaries established from the beginning. We're thrilled to share that you'll be grandparents, I told them during a brief visit to their home, but I need to be clear about something important. Our child will only have relationships with people who can model healthy interactions. That means no favoritism, no dismissing feelings, and no excusing harmful behavior. My mother immediately became defensive. Are you saying we won't be allowed to see our own grandchild? I'm saying your relationship with your grandchild will depend on your willingness to interact in healthy ways. The patterns that were harmful to me won't be repeated with my child. It was a difficult conversation, but a necessary one. In the months that followed, I observed small efforts from my parents to respect these boundaries. My father occasionally asked about the parenting books I was reading. My mother sent baby clothes without passive-aggressive notes attached. Jake remained distant, apparently uninterested in his role as future uncle. By the time our daughter Lily was born, we had established a cautious relationship with my parents. They were allowed supervised visits, but understood that any return to old patterns would result in immediate consequences. It wasn't the warm, unconditional grandparent relationship I might have hoped for, but it was honest and safe. Now, as I look at Lily sleeping in her crib at age 2, I reflect on the journey that brought me here. The painful staircase incident at my wedding rehearsal, while traumatic, ultimately freed me from patterns that had constrained my entire life. It forced a reckoning that might otherwise have been postponed indefinitely, allowing cycles of dysfunction to continue into the next generation. The healing process has been neither quick nor linear. There are still difficult days and uncomfortable family gatherings. My relationship with Jake remains essentially non-existent, a loss I've had to accept. My parents try in their limited way, but still occasionally slip into old habits of comparison and minimization. But the difference now is that I no longer question my right to set boundaries or wonder if I'm overreacting. I recognize unhealthy patterns quickly and address them directly. Most importantly, I've broken the cycle for Lily, ensuring that she grows up in a home where her feelings are valid, her voice is heard, and her personhood is respected. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family, please know that change is possible, even if reconciliation isn't. You deserve relationships built on mutual respect. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of courage that benefits everyone involved, even those who initially resist it. True family, I've learned, is defined by actions rather than blood. It's found in the people who celebrate your joy without jealousy, who support your growth without competition, who acknowledge your pain without dismissal. Sometimes that includes biological relatives, sometimes it doesn't. Either way, you have the right to create a life surrounded by genuine love. The staircase incident marked the end of my acceptance of dysfunction, but also the beginning of a more authentic life. Each step down those marble stairs was painful, but they ultimately led me to solid ground where I could build something better for myself, for Meredith, and for Lily. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you found it helpful. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the hardest steps lead to the most beautiful destinations.